fancy intro music. Yeah! Woo!
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel where today we're talking about officers again and the math behind how they work, because there was officers added recently to the transporter pattern store. So I want to take this opportunity to break one of those down before we start a new arc and even more officers come in. Well, that's no longer, it's pretty much well known. Officers are coming. If you caught the hint that I gave out for one particular officer earlier in the week, or actually 1 week ago from today, was it last Monday? You should know something that's coming, and then DJ has some really great hints in Sunday's podcast. If you haven't checked that out as well, check out Ultimate DJ. So today we're going to take a look at TOS Spock, who is now in the transporter pattern store, and it really comes down to, is he valuable, and when or should you go after them? So here's TOS Spock right here. See, I don't even currently have the transporter patterns to go after TOS Spock, but we're still going to talk about it anyway. And speaking of new officers in the game, let me go ahead and just get this one out the way. That's definitely not coming. All right, that's a Photoshop. So I've had a couple people send me this one. As much as I would love to get Judge Q in the game, not happening tomorrow. Or is this actually a diversion and I'm lying to you and Judge Q is coming tomorrow and the hint is actually so obvious because it's right in front of you? That's how I pull the wool over your eyes. Guess you'll find out in 24 hours. So I want to talk about TOS Spock. Now, to do that, we're actually going to use our good friends over at STFC Shout out to Ripper for the wonderful product that they have put together. Product makes it sound like a paid endorsement. But anyway, TOS Spock. And the reason I wanted to show this is this part right here, where we're talking about the levels of Spock and how Spock works. So with Spock, he's going to take the critical damage, the actual damage, not the percent chance, but the actual damage, and reduce it based on their rank. So as you can see in the clip right here, we'll be looking at a starting with 50%, which is not a small amount. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I will say that it's not doing very much at all. But I can say this. If you are a lower level player in the 20s and 30s, this is, if he were maxed, very actually good officer. Very good. How good, in fact? Well, let's actually discuss the math of how this process actually works, because I know for some people there's a little bit of confusion there, to the point where you can argue that even only at rank 3 there could be value. But the real key for me is he does have to be leveled, which is problematic for a lot of people because, well, he's an epic and he's hard to get. Now, for those asking, his captain's ability does work. However, I don't find a ton of value in it. But if you want to look at that when defending at the start of each turn, TOS Spock restores shield health to an amount 100% to the defense of the officers, meaning that it works the same if you're going to stack with like Zhao or Marcus. You know, you could have a build that was, you know, PvP-ish. I just probably wouldn't have him as a captain, but if you wanted to have like a Kirk, Zhao, Marcus, and then TOS Spock, you know, whatever you wanted to put together or something, you could run that and get that. But the officer build is where I really want to focus on, because I feel like that's where the value of this officer is. Now, the theme of the TOS crew was basically PvP. TOS Kirk, TOS Uhura are very well known. Obviously, we have TOS Chekhov and Bones, and you know, so we've got defense in terms of defense on our nodes. We've got actual PvP in space. We've got explorers getting love. So there's a lot of value there. But let's talk about this real quick and how this can be very important in terms of the critical percentage and how that's going to work. So to do so, we're going to have to bust into some Scopely math, which is so much fun. Yay! Scopely math, the best math. To do the Scopely math, what we're going to do is actually, I'm just going to pull up a ship and we're going to talk about it. So that ability, and in fact, let me just keep that on the screen for now. That ability is in reference to this right here, critical damage. So here's critical chance and there's critical damage. Now the critical damage is what you're actually going to get if you hit a critical, the multiplier. So for those who are not aware how it works, critical damage takes all the damage that you would do. So all the bonuses and all the officer bonuses and all the other stuff, all the research, all that gets your damage to a point. Once you've created that amount of damage, that's how much you've made. And then critical multiplies on top of that. So I know that sounds a little confusing. So how about we pull out the handy dandy calculator? Would it be easier if we pull out the handy dandy calculator? I feel like it would be a little bit easier. So let's do that. So let's just say the amount of damage your ship created was 100. That's with research, that's with officers. You've created 100 damage and a battle log. Now let's say that we were going to multiply that. So to multiply that, we would take that 168% that we saw before. Let me move this just a little bit so you can see it. Okay, cool. Now we're in screen. Now we're in frame. So we see the 168%. So to do that, we would simply multiply by 1.68. Bam! Now we know how much damage we created. 168% is just 1.68. So if you were to multiply 200%, you're just multiplying by 2. You're doubling. So this is how we calculate critical damage. Whatever damage you've created prior to critical, after all the research, all the officers, etc., then you multiply criticals on top of that. Now let's get into how that could be actually really useful with TOS Spock. So let's use 100 because 100 is an easy number. We like 100. It's simple. Now let's do math. Math is fun. Let's actually make this Scopely math easy. So max Spock is 150%, right? Max right there. So what if we took 168% and subtracted 150? We'd be left with 18. Now let's go back to how that would actually impact our math. 100. Now we're going to multiply again, but we no longer have that base number. Now we would only be multiplying by 0.18, which would equal 18. Isn't it nice to use numbers like 100? If only it was like that in the battle log. So if you actually had a TOS Spock, if you were running against a crew, let's say that it was a Saladin that was running Gorkon, Kurla, and Honor Guard Worf, a critical build. Well, if you could subtract below their 100% mark, they're actually going to do less damage with criticals than more. So a Saladin that would do 4 million damage maybe now only does 400,000 damage. You know, a massive swing on the other side because of how much you've been able to subtract from that. Let's swap it to a Saladin since we're mentioning a Saladin. Now, keep in mind that this is on a level 40 account, so some of the research and everything has made this a little bit higher. But mine is currently sitting at 208%. D3s have a little bit lower of a critical damage boost, but they do have a higher critical chance, if you've never noticed that in the game. So let's keep this on TOS Spock and talk about this application here. So let's say that my Saladin, because we know Saladins are huge. Let's go ahead and make a big number, 1 million. My Saladin could do a 1 million shot. Huge, scary. So 150 at max, 208 over there. So now if we do 208 divided by 150, subtracting 150, what do we get? We're going to actually do the math right here in front of you because that's amazing. 58. So now we're going to take that 58 and we're going to multiply it by 1 million. And do stupid stuff like that because we didn't put the decimal. Let's do it again with the decimal. Yeah, we're not even going to edit that. We're not even going to edit it. We're just going to leave it in. I almost did it again. Bam! That's a big drop. Almost half the damage. And that's 2.58. Now, the fun thing is if you actually wanted to, say, have Pike here, maybe increase this ability, you can negate that entirely. So basically what TOS Spock gives you is a very good anti-critical build. And for a lot of people running critical officers and for a lot of the new stuff coming out being critical base, that's huge. And imagine even having a 100% subtraction. Now, here's why I say it's really only for the 20s and 30s. Because as you level up in the game and as you get higher, let's say you get to the ISS Jellyfish or something. Well, it's 209%. But what's my auger at now? I don't even remember what my auger's at. My auger's at 194. My Franklin here. But then you'll see some of the higher level players at 300%. So having a 150% reduction is really not that big a deal. But that's after research. It's me going into the 40s. It's all these other things that have transpired to get me to this point. Early on, there's actually some value to be made and an argument to be made for TOS Spock being a very good officer in PvP. But the key is you really need a minimum of rank 3. And the reason being is you've got to get him to a point where he's taking your opponent's critical damage in terms of the multiplier below the 1. So 100%. Anything below that, you're actually forcing criticals to make that ship do less damage, which is fantastic, but a lot easier said than done. So I think that's the tricky thing with TOS Spock is the ability is low-key very, very good. Sarah, I got to make sure I set these or I'm going to forget. The ability itself is very good if you get it leveled up and can work on him. The problem is procurement of this officer is very difficult, where you have to use transporter patterns and things like that. The main people that I think would take advantage of this officer mathematically in the game can't get him. Now, if you're sitting there camping for a while and you've got maxed officers and you can really grind that, because I think DJ says that he can grind like 10,000 transporter patterns in a very short amount of time because he has so many maxed rare and epic officers. If you can do that, and you are a player who plans to camp in the 20s and 30s, well, this is giving you an option in PvP. My only issue though is because it takes so long. This is why before I've never recommended him, but I do want to explain how he works. I'm not going after him because in the 40s, I don't feel like there's any value for me. But I will say that in certain situations, this is how it works, and this is where the value can be found if you're choosing to go in that direction. And hopefully this video educated or edified you or informed you or just straight up entertained you in some way or another, and hope you enjoyed it. If you did, smash the like button. If you have questions about any of the things that we did, including me snafuing and not being able to use a basic calculator on stream, well, comment down below and let me know. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're a lower level player or higher level player and have questions about certain officers, remember to drop them below. We just did a video there and I'm going through those comments, answering those questions. So make sure you check back to see if I've answered your question on the officer video. As always, I appreciate your viewership. I appreciate your patronage. I appreciate you being here. Live long and prosper. Stay safe with the Space Cowboys. We'll catch you on the next one. Deuces. That's me. We outie.
An even better outro than the intro. For the Empire and glory to your house.